The room was silent, except for the heavy ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. My heart pounded louder than the clock itself as the lawyer cleared his throat and opened the thick envelope. "This is the last will and testament of Richard Hayes," he announced, his voice echoing against the polished oak walls. I sat there frozen, my palms slick with sweat, knowing that my entire life could change with the next words spoken. Then it happened. "To my beloved wife, Margaret," he began. My stepmother's lips curled into a triumphant smile. "I leave the family estate, valued at $3.2 million, along with the primary accounts and holdings." My chest tightened. The estate? That was supposed to be mine. Father had promised me. He said, "One day, this house will be yours." I could barely breathe as Margaret clasped her pearls, pretending to wipe away a tear that never fell. When the lawyer finished reading, my name had been reduced to a single line, a token inheritance of just $1,000. The humiliation burned through me like fire. My stepmother reached across the table, her hand resting smugly on the lawyer's arm. "Richard trusted me," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. But something felt wrong. I remembered conversations with my father, his reassurances, the way he had hidden certain papers in his study. Margaret's grip on his life had been suffocating, manipulative, and now, even in death, her control extended into his will. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happened next proved one thing. No matter how carefully you manipulate the game, karma has a way of striking back, harder than you ever expect. Growing up, my family was complicated long before the will was ever mentioned. My father, Richard, was a strong man, respected in business circles and admired by many. But at home, things weren't nearly as polished. After my mother passed away when I was 15, the warmth of our house disappeared. My father remarried Margaret just 2 years later, and everything shifted. At first, I tried to accept her. I wanted to believe she could fill the void my mother left behind. But Margaret was never interested in being a mother to me. She was interested in my father's fortune. She moved into our mansion with her designer luggage and icy smile, instantly rearranging the house as if she had always belonged there. The staff obeyed her every word, and my father, blinded by grief and longing for companionship, let her take control. I quickly became the outsider in my own home. Holidays turned tense. Margaret insisted on new traditions, pushing aside the ones my mother had cherished. She bought extravagant gifts for my father, while offering me carefully chosen tokens, expensive but hollow, like jewelry that didn't suit me or clothes she knew I'd never wear. My father often reassured me in private, "Don't worry, sweetheart. This house, the land, the family business, it will all be yours one day. I've made sure of it." His words kept me sane, a small flame of security in the cold shadow Margaret cast. But Margaret was clever. She played the role of dutiful wife in public, organizing charity events, charming guests with her poised demeanor. Behind closed doors, she undermined me at every turn. "Your father is too kind," she would whisper. "You'll never be able to handle responsibilities like these." Tensions grew sharper when money was involved. My father owned several properties, a downtown office building, rental homes, and farmland inherited from his own father. Margaret constantly advised him to sell, to consolidate, to invest differently. She convinced him to make her joint owner of several accounts, claiming it was for convenience. Each signature he gave away chipped at the security he had promised me. I watched helplessly, knowing her grip was tightening. My cousins and extended relatives noticed too. At family gatherings, whispers followed her. "She's positioning herself. He doesn't see what's happening." But no one dared confront my father. His loyalty to Margaret was absolute. By the time his health began to decline, Margaret had positioned herself as the guardian of everything he had built. She monitored his medications, managed his calendar, and even controlled who could visit him. I tried to spend as much time as possible with him, but every moment felt stolen, as though I needed permission to love my own father. And then the topic of the will surfaced. Margaret insisted on being present during every discussion. I remember standing outside his study one evening, hearing her voice murmur, persuasive and low, followed by the sound of my father's weary sigh. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just influencing him, She was rewriting my future. Memories have a cruel way of resurfacing when you least expect them. After the will was read, I couldn't stop replaying moments from my past, moments where the seeds of betrayal were quietly planted. I remembered my 17th birthday. My father had promised me something special, the antique locket that once belonged to my mother. He had hidden it away for years, telling me, "When the time is right, it will be yours." But when the day came, Margaret appeared with a velvet box of her own. Inside was a diamond bracelet. Everyone gasped in admiration, but I knew what it meant. She had overshadowed my mother's gift. Later that night, when I asked my father about the locket, his face fell. "Margaret thought it might be too emotional for you right now," he explained. My heart cracked that night, and the locket never resurfaced. There were other moments. Promises made, then quietly broken. My college tuition, for example. My father had always said he would cover it completely, but when the time came, Margaret insisted I take out loans. "It'll build character," she said coldly, while she vacationed in Paris with my father. He went along with her reasoning, and I swallowed my pride. I worked double shifts, scraping by, while she flaunted luxury handbags. Each injustice felt like a bruise that never healed. Still, I clung to my father's private reassurances. "Don't worry. One day, you'll see. I've made sure you're taken care of." His words were like oxygen to me, though I often wondered if he truly understood how deeply Margaret had sunk her claws into him. What hurt most wasn't just the money. It was the way she manipulated affection. My father adored her, and she knew it. She'd lean against him, whispering in his ear, and he would nod as if her words were scripture. When I tried to speak, he grew impatient, brushing me off. The little girl who once ran into his arms now felt like an intruder. By the time his health failed, the emotional battlefield was littered with scars. Margaret controlled access to him in his final months, rationing my visits like crumbs. Some days she would say, "He's too tired, come back tomorrow." Other times she'd let me sit at his bedside, only to hover, listening to every word, ensuring I couldn't speak freely. The night he passed, I wasn't there. Margaret claimed he wanted it that way. He didn't want you to see him weak. But I'll never know if that was true. What I do know is that she was the one holding his hand as he took his last breath, and not me, his daughter. So when the lawyer read the will and reduced my inheritance to a token, it wasn't just about money. It was the final blow in a war I had been fighting silently for years. A war I hadn't realized was about to take a shocking turn. The will should have been final. The lawyer's words should have sealed my fate, a token inheritance and nothing more. But deep down, I knew there had to be more. My father wasn't careless. He wasn't the type of man to abandon his only daughter for a woman he had known less than a decade. The first twist came 2 weeks after the funeral. I received a letter from my father's longtime business partner, Mr. Caldwell. His handwriting was shaky but urgent. "Come see me. There are things you don't know." When I arrived at his office, the air smelled of old paper and dust, the walls lined with ledgers and contracts. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Your father trusted you more than you realize," he said. But Margaret, she was persuasive. She pushed him to change the will. Still, Richard left behind something he never told her about. My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Mr. Caldwell pulled out a file from his desk, its edges frayed from age. Inside were copies of older wills, versions that named me as the primary heir to the estate, the properties, and the business holdings. My name was everywhere, in bold ink, before Margaret had come into the picture. Tears blurred my vision. Why didn't he fight harder? Why didn't he stop her? Caldwell shook his head. He was ill, exhausted. She was always by his side, whispering. He didn't have the strength. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. But wills are tricky things. If there's evidence of manipulation, coercion, or fraud, they can be challenged. That night, I confronted Margaret. She was in the parlor, sipping her favorite Chardonnay, the pearls around her neck glinting in the light. "You manipulated him?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. She smirked, not even pretending to deny it. "The house is mine now. Father wanted it that way." "No," I shot back. "You wanted it that way. There's a difference." Her smile only widened. And who will believe you? He signed the papers. His signature is all that matters. But she underestimated me. I wasn't the naive girl she thought I was. I had allies. I had documents. And most importantly, I had the truth. As I left the room, her voice followed me like venom. You'll lose everything if you fight me. Yet for the first time in years, I felt something stirring inside me. A defiance stronger than her grip. If you're still with me, stay until the end. The truth will shock you. Because this battle was far from over. And Margaret had no idea that the very secrets she tried to bury were about to claw their way back to the surface. I thought the confrontation with Margaret would shake her composure, but it only seemed to embolden her. She walked around the house as if she had already won, her heels clicking against the marble floors like a drumbeat of victory. Still, I refused to surrender. I began searching for answers in the very place she thought she controlled, my father's study. The study had always been my father's sanctuary. Shelves of leather-bound books lined the walls, and the scent of cigar smoke lingered in the air even after his passing. Margaret rarely entered, perhaps because it reminded her of the one world she could never fully dominate, my father's mind. Late one evening, while the house slept, I pulled open the drawers of his oak desk. Beneath stacks of invoices and bank statements, I discovered a false bottom. My hands trembled as I lifted it. Inside, wrapped in brittle parchment, was a sealed envelope marked with my father's handwriting. For my daughter, when the time comes. My breath caught. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a letter and a small brass key. The letter was short but powerful. If Margaret has her way, you will be left with nothing. But truth cannot be erased. Use this key and you will understand everything. Trust only Caldwell. Father. The next day, I showed the letter to Mr. Caldwell. His eyes widened. That key belongs to one of the safe deposit boxes downtown. He never mentioned this to Margaret. Let's go. At the bank, my heart pounded as the clerk brought us a long, narrow box. When I opened it, my world shifted. Inside were handwritten journals, financial records, and photographs. Proof of Margaret's manipulation. Letters from her to lawyers, drafts of suggested clauses for the will, and even receipts showing lavish purchases from accounts my father never authorized. But the most damning piece was a signed affidavit from one of the nurses who cared for my father in his final months. It detailed how Margaret pressured him daily, controlling who could visit, withholding information, and even threatening staff to keep quiet. I felt both rage and relief. Rage at the scale of her betrayal, but relief that my father hadn't abandoned me. He had fought for me in the only way he could, by leaving behind the truth. That night, I returned home with the documents. Margaret was waiting in the dining room sipping wine. She noticed the folder in my hands and her smile faltered. "What do you have there?" she asked, her voice sharper than usual. "Everything," I replied coldly. "Every lie you told, every dollar you stole, every word you forced him to sign. It's all here." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. She tried to recover quickly, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. The battle lines had been drawn, and Margaret was finally beginning to realize she was no longer the only one holding the cards. The folder in my hands became my shield, the weapon my father had secretly forged for me. Every page inside it screamed betrayal, and I knew Margaret's empire of lies was finally crumbling. Mr. Caldwell arranged a meeting with the family attorney, this time without Margaret present. I placed the documents on the polished mahogany table, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. The attorney's brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages. "This changes everything," he muttered. Margaret stormed in halfway through the meeting, her heels striking the floor like gunfire. "What is going on here?" she demanded, but the attorney held up his hand. "Mrs. Hayes, please, sit down." She tried to laugh it off, her voice brittle. "Those papers mean nothing. He signed the will." But then I placed the nurse's affidavit in front of her. The color drained from her face. The attorney read it aloud. Mrs. Hayes repeatedly instructed staff to limit access to Mr. Hayes, pressured him to amend legal documents, and threatened professional consequences for those who resisted. For a moment, silence filled the room. Margaret's mask slipped. "You don't understand," she hissed. "He needed me. He trusted me." "No," I said firmly. He feared you, and he left me the proof." The attorney leaned back in his chair. "Given this evidence, the will is highly contestable. Courts take coercion very seriously. These documents could void the latest version entirely." Margaret's composure cracked. Her hands shook as she tried to gather her pearls of dignity. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You'll never survive this fight. The estate, the lawyers, the press, it will destroy you." I looked her directly in the eyes, my voice calm but resolute. "I already survived you." Days turned into weeks, and the legal battle unfolded like a storm. Margaret tried everything: stalling tactics, emotional outbursts, even counterclaims. But with every motion filed, every piece of evidence presented, her grip weakened. The journals, the letters, the receipts, they painted a picture so vivid that even she couldn't deny it. And then came the final blow. The judge read his ruling. "This court finds sufficient evidence of undue influence and manipulation. The amended will is hereby voided. The estate will revert to the previous legally binding document." My breath caught as the words sank in. The previous will, the one that named me as the rightful heir. The house, the business holdings, the fortune, everything my father intended for me was restored. Margaret let out a strangled cry, clutching her pearls as if they were the last remnants of her power. She had gambled everything and lost. If this shocked you, hit the like button. More unbelievable stories are coming. Because in the end, karma didn't just strike back. It demolished her carefully built empire, leaving her with nothing but the emptiness she had tried to bury me in. When the gavel struck and the courtroom emptied, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because justice had been served, heavier because of the scars left behind. Winning the estate didn't erase the years of manipulation or the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if my father had truly abandoned me. But now I knew the truth. He hadn't. He had fought for me in silence, leaving breadcrumbs of hope that ultimately became my salvation. Walking through the halls of the mansion after the ruling felt surreal. Every painting, every antique, every polished surface carried both memories and ghosts. Margaret was gone, stripped of her power, her influence reduced to whispers among those who once admired her. She moved out in shame, her shadow finally lifting from the house that had been mine all along. Yet victory came with a cost. The legal battle had drained me emotionally, reopening wounds I thought I had buried. Friends asked if I felt triumphant. The truth? I felt broken and rebuilt all at once. My father's voice echoed in my memory. "One day, this house will be yours." Now it was, but at a price neither of us had wanted to pay. I tried to honor him in the months that followed. I restored the old traditions Margaret had discarded. Simple family dinners, the annual charity my mother once loved, even the holiday gatherings that had been overshadowed by tension. Slowly, the house began to feel like home again, not just a battlefield. People often ask me if I regret fighting. Part of me wishes things could have been different, that my father had been stronger, that Margaret had been kinder. But another part of me knows the fight was inevitable. Greed exposes people in ways love never can. Margaret's downfall wasn't just legal, it was karmic. She lost everything because she built her world on lies, while I gained everything because my father built his on truth. Even if it took time for that truth to surface. Heranças podem dividir, but the truth always rises. That's what I carry with me now. Not just the estate, but the lesson that no manipulation lasts forever. Secrets rot in the dark until they're forced into the light. So I'll ask you, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you have fought even if it meant tearing open old wounds? Or would you have walked away, letting the past remain buried? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want more shocking inheritance stories, keep watching this playlist, because sometimes the most unbelievable dramas aren't fiction. They're family.